Just a reminder, and for those of you who weren't here yesterday, we started off this conference with a recognition that the intersectional crises that we face in our society today, racial inequality, economic inequality, climate change, real challenges to fundamental features of democracy, are so complex and at such large scale that if we're ever going to confront them and solve them, we really need to be all in. And all in respecting all of our knowledge, both in communities and universities, and really all coming together to figure out how do we solve these problems together. And we were challenged in that process in our early plenary session, and Steve McKay was so articulate in saying that, is that we often are seeing, especially as community-engaged research has become more accepted and more lifted up within the university, there's a lot of talk about, the public good and working with communities. And we're at a point now where we really need to be asking the hard questions. When we talk about the public good, well, which public? When we talk about broader benefit, who are we really talking about and who is benefiting? How do we really use this opportunity, not just for token contributions to diversity and equity, but really to transform our institutions and our societies. Yeah, thank you. Let's give that a big clap. And Steve was so articulate in saying, we need to be thinking about how do we move from the public good to the public better. And really thinking about co-producing knowledge for justice. And we were also reminded as part of that, as my dean likes to frequently say, budgets are moral documents, right? And the resources and where resources are going reflect the values. And that's part of what we need to be looking at, is what are our budgets saying about the values that we have inherited and how are we restructuring those? So today we're going all in to those difficult questions. And that's what we want to do in our discussions today, is really, get out of our comfort zone. Ask the difficult questions. Feel uncomfortable in what that means, because that's how progress happens, is being out of our comfort zone and really thinking, how do we move forward on this? And to start us off on that conversation, our plenary session this morning is really designed to be thinking about the university as an institution. And how can the university as a whole be a better partner with communities in our local area. And I'm so pleased we have three fantastic leaders, two of them from our campus here, and then our guest is Nancy Cantor, who's Chancellor of Rutgers University, Newark. And she's really a nationally recognized and internationally recognized for her leadership in emphasizing the role of universities as anchor institutions in their communities, but especially by forging diverse cross-sector collaboratives and leveraging public engaged scholarship to advance racial equity and equitable growth. She'll be speaking first. Our format is she'll give some opening remarks, and I'm going to introduce all the three of them at the moment before inviting her up. Our Chancellor from University of California, Santa Cruz, Cynthia Larive, or Cindy as she likes to go by on campus, which we're very appreciative of. She's the 11th Chancellor of UC Santa Cruz. She joined UC Santa Cruz in 2019, coming from UC Riverside. She's a first-generation college student herself. Yeah, right. And throughout her career, she's really had a strong commitment to student success, inclusion, equity, really has embraced UC Santa Cruz's tradition of interdisciplinary approach to research for the public good, and really played a really important role in helping to build ties with our local community college system, our public school systems throughout Watsonville and the Salinas Valley. So we're super pleased that she's here with us today and her support for community engaged research. And then Katharyne Mitchell is our Dean of Social Sciences and a distinguished professor of social sciences. She's a geographer by training, and just incredible research spanning migration, spaces of sanctuary, education, democracy, urban space, social justice. And it was her vision of the need for an institution to help be that bridge between the social sciences and social justice research and community and external stakeholders that really led to the creation of the Institute for Social Transformation. So, yeah, thank you, Katharyne. We would not be here today without her leadership. So please join me in welcoming all three of them, and I'll ask Nancy to come up to the stage and make a few opening remarks. But welcome Nancy, Cindy, and Katharyne.
For a little person, so it's really wonderful to be here, and Chris, congratulations to you and all your colleagues, really, for putting this together. It's remarkable, and the sun is shining. It's been raining in Newark, so this is wonderful. So I'm going to just very briefly talk about a few or try to address a few questions that Chris outlined that I think kind of to set a stage for our conversation. And the first is really a question that I think should motivate all of us, which is, why is this the moment to do community engaged work? Why should universities be doing this now? And the argument that I would make, and that I make regularly, is that universities as anchor institutions have a real opportunity right now to address social mobility, equitable growth, and racial and social justice. It may seem odd in the middle of one of the most divisive anti-justice climates in our country and in our world. It might seem odd for me to stand here and say that this is a moment. I think part of that comes from the fact that I'm a social psychologist. And when I think about the things that have happened in my field over centuries, decades, they've all come from these moments. So Kurt Lewin and action research came out of World War II. The development of real attention to intergroup dialogue and what that really means came out of the civil rights movement. I would argue that we have a moment now that requires us, not just allows us, but requires us to really double down on how to make universities what Chris Brink says in a wonderful book on the soul of the university that he published in 2018. He says, universities have to be asking not just what we're good at, but what we're good for. And this is the moment. I would argue that this is the moment when we have to do that. Why is this the moment? Well, it's obvious that we are living through trauma at every level in this country and globally. That goes without saying. Yes, we've seen it exacerbated and brought to the fore by the pandemic, but it's been there for centuries, for decades. So first, there is that. But out of that has come some odd sense, I would say in a way odd, among some of the largest corporations, cultural institutions, maybe even universities, to say that this is indeed a moment of racial reckoning, a moment of social justice reckoning, a moment of economic reckoning, with a wealth gap that is widening and widening, with a complete turning our back on decades of centuries of immigration that has made this country what it is. So we have a moment where people are, on the one hand, broadly divided and divisive as a landscape, and on the other hand, locally, there is a moment for digging in because people are feeling a local sense of reckoning. And that's an odd paradox, but it's one that I think we ought to take advantage of. And then there's, of course, what Bill Fry, the demographer, calls the diversity explosion. So when I'm sitting there with a C-suite guy, and they're usually guys, I'll say, so who are going to be your consumers of the future? Or when I'm sitting there with some, not your chancellor, but some university chancellors and presidents who don't necessarily buy this, and I say, and by the way, who's going to be your who's going to be your students of the future? Who's going to be the professoriate of the future? So there is a moment of opportunity here. And I am your classic defensive pessimist. I did all my research on defensive pessimism. So it is really odd for me to be sitting here saying that there's some hope. But I think there is some hope. And I want to use, just parochially, if you will, an example of the hope I see in Newark, New Jersey. And my buddy in this work, Tim Eatman, is sitting right there, and several of our wonderful students are out here. Newark, New Jersey is the classic of what MLK called the two Americas. It's absolutely the classic of that. It's the largest city in New Jersey. It has many Fortune 100 corporations headquartered in that city. It's a cultural hub with phenomenal cultural institutions and a long history. It's a transportation hub. So on the one hand, there's that America. On the other hand, it's a majority black and brown city that is huge poverty rate, low post-secondary attainment rate, low unemployment in those big Fortune 100 companies and universities and hospitals, all of which are there, very low employment of Newark residents. It has a history, however, of remarkable community-based organizations. Oh, I'm sorry.
I just need to tighten it up a little bit.
Sorry. Moving around too much. Amazing community-based organizations that all came out of the Newark Rebellion in 1967. Newark Community Development Network, Newark NAACP, Newark New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, all of whom we collaborate with, trusted, on-the-ground, community-based organizations, phenomenal arts and cultural history, and a mayor, the son of Amiri Baraka, Raz Baraka, a phenomenal mayor. So I say all this because this is an example of, on the one hand, the two Americas, and on the other hand, the opportunity that we have to make an actual difference at this moment. And so what we've done at Rutgers Newark, and I'm just using this as one example, this isn't bragging. There's lots of work to be done, and it's one step forward and 20 back. But what we've done is we have committed the institution in its strategic plan, which was very ground up, in its plan to answer the question of what does the public need from Rutgers Newark. And we need 4 things, and we organize all our commitments around those. We need to be a place of social mobility. So we create the Honors Living Learning community that Tim Eatman runs, and some of our students are here, with at least 50% of the students in it coming from Newark, with students coming from all over, and through various paths, committed to social justice, but most importantly, we as an institution, committed to the assets that our students bring to the table, committed to reversing the classic university deficit lens, committed to saying the lived experience they bring to the table. Formerly incarcerated students, they can tell you more about the new Jim Crow than even Michelle Alexander can. Committed to what it means to be the newest Americans. Committed to what it means to not speak English as a first family language. Committed to lives in translation, working as contact tracers all through the city of Newark because we bring the languages that need to be brought to bear. So on the one hand, committed to social mobility. We run the largest prison education and reentry program throughout every prison in the state of New Jersey, and we bring formerly incarcerated to get amazing degrees with us because they know what it means to do truth, racial healing, and transformation in our centers. So social mobility on the one hand. And by the way, that also means, of course, we have to be financially affordable. And so we do a full last-in scholarship for all Newark residents with under certain incomes, which is a lot of Newark residents, and for any community college transfer, because the vast majority of first-generation students will have their first taste of higher education at a community college. And so we have to be deep partners, and we are with all our community colleges. So the first thing is social mobility. The second thing is publicly engaged scholarship, and those things go together. Because if you're going to create an asset-based lens on the lived experience of your students, you better also, as scholars, create an asset-based lens on the lived experience of your community. And we as an institution need to be rewarding that scholarship. We need to be rewarding it in tenure and promotion. We need to be rewarding it in seeding the work day in and day out of publicly engaged scholars. So it's our scholars who are feeding the mayor's Equitable Growth Advisory Council unbelievable data on who owns Newark. Literally the latest report. Who owns Newark? You know who owns Newark? Who owns single-family houses in Newark? These anonymous LLCs who haven't ever stepped foot in Newark, New Jersey, and who have bought up all the affordable, or once affordable, single residence housing and jacked up the rents and not created viable living environments for Newarkers. So it's our scholars who are providing all the data that then gets translated to inclusionary zoning laws, to eviction protection, to affordable housing rules and regulations from the mayor. It's our criminal justice faculty who are doing analyses for the mayor and who create the Newark Public Safety Collaborative with the community street team, with all the Newark Community Development Network folks on the ground, so that we can give data to law enforcement that says, these are the places where crime occurs. Stop paying attention to the people you think create crime. Pay attention to the places where crime occurs. So you know why cars get stolen? Because people leave keys in cars and run in to get to a grocery store. You're in the middle of a food desert, you don't have time to get out to that Whole Foods, so you better drop your car, run in, and get what you can get from the local bodega, and your car gets stolen. So then we have the Newark Public School kids doing poster campaigns all over Newark. Don't leave your key in the car. And car thefts have gone down dramatically, actually. We have the Humanities Action Lab folks doing amazing collaborations, including with our HLLC students, with our Ironbound Community Corp on all of the toxic pollution that has gone on. Where is that pollution? It's not sitting where those LLC folks live. It's sitting in the Ironbound of Newark. And the people of Newark need to be at the table making environmental justice. I promise, Chris, I'll stop soon. And then the final thing I want to say on that is that you can't just do this work as universities on your own. And you can't do it, obviously, from an ivory tower, and we better not be ivory anymore. But you also can't do it in a one-and-done basis. You have to create sustained collaboratives that have everybody at the table. So we have a Newark Anchor Collaborative because the mayor came to me and to the head of Prudential Financial and said, you folks need to get all the big universities, hospitals, and corporations sitting around the table and pledging to hire Newarkers. You need to hire, he said, Nance, you all need to hire 2,020 Newarkers by 2020. This was in 2017. We've hired 4,000 Newarkers among the 16 anchors up to now. You need to buy your resources, source your contracts with local Black and brown and women entrepreneurs in Newark and business owners. We're doing that, right? And then you need to take a racial equity lens on who you are and what you do, because that's how you can contribute to equitable growth. So all the anchors, the cultural institutions, the hospitals, the universities, and we have 4 of them in Newark, and the big corporations all sit around a table pledging now. We'll see how it goes, but it's been going, pledging to work with the Newark Community Development Network, to work with the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, and to re-envision ourselves through a racial equity lens. And then finally, and I mean finally, you've got to say the word. What do I mean, say the word? We have a campaign in the state of New Jersey. New Jersey was the last northern state to get rid of slavery. We have a campaign to say the word reparations. And Tim is a co-PI on our reparations project. And what we are doing is community dialogues throughout the city of Newark. And public historians and students are working on finding all the long lineage from those slave families all the way through redlining, through segregated schools, segregated by race and class, all the way to unaffordable housing, etc. And then we have community dialogues with the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, the Newark NAACP, and the Newark Community Development Network, and our scholars and students, figuring out what reparations would look like for Newark, New Jersey. What do local solutions look like? And in case you think New Jersey, like California, is so bloody progressive, the legislature, instead of creating a task force on reparations, which is what we all asked for, the governor created a task force on wealth equity. I guess you can say wealth gaps, but you can't say reparations. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy, for those inspiring remarks. It's really great to hear some of the wonderful examples of what's going on at Rutgers and Newark, and we admire your work and want to emulate it here. I'd like to welcome everyone to UC Santa Cruz. Just delighted to see the overwhelming interest in this conference, and it's a subject that really gets to the very core of our university. In just a few years, UC Santa Cruz will mark its 60th anniversary, and in our 6 decades, we have not strayed from our founding tenets: outstanding undergraduate teaching, interdisciplinary research excellence, all seen through a lens of equity and social justice. And community-engaged research is central to our work, and I'm just happy to have the opportunity to highlight some of the engagement with our surrounding community in my brief remarks today. We're committed to student success, and that extends beyond our undergraduate and graduate students. We seek to help students before they ever step foot on a college campus. Led by our Educational Partnership Center, we work to build pathways to UC Santa Cruz and to other educational institutions. And I'm glad that you highlighted the importance of community college and their partnerships with our universities. This work by the Partnership Center is largely embedded in educational sites within nearby Watsonville and in the Salinas Valley. The center also coordinates K-16 partnerships throughout this amazing 6-county Central Coast region that runs from Santa Cruz down to the LA county line. And that partnership is really focused on increasing higher education attainment for students across that region. Our work is especially focused on the Monterey Bay area region and beyond our region to the Pajaro, Salinas, and Silicon Valleys. Our Educational Partnership Center builds educational equity and creates opportunities for students. And we do that by forging partnerships and empowering students with the tools and support systems they need. The center serves about 11,000 K-12 students annually and coordinates 9 programs that include the Early Academic Outreach Program, Gear Up, MESA, Girls in Engineering, the California State Summer School for Mathematics and Science, which just received really important funding from our state legislature, and the Science Internship Program. And we're especially excited about our Campus Plus Community Initiative that's led by Professor Rebecca London. This project's committed to partnerships with an emphasis on interdisciplinary research and the intentional inclusion of students, faculty, staff, across the whole university, and those folks share in this desire to engage in community knowledge production for community mobilization. It's not just about studying and publishing, it's really community engagement, research with a goal of change. Campus Plus Community launched just last year, and it provides a set of values and support systems to ensure best practices for this engagement, mutually beneficial, long-term relationships built on mutual trust and strong communication. UC Santa Cruz also works with the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership. This is a group goes by MBEP. It's a regional nonprofit that consists of public, private, and civic entities from throughout Monterey Bay, San Benito, and Santa Cruz counties. And I'm honored to serve as the MBEP board chair. MBEP's mission is to improve the economic health and quality of life in our region, creating good jobs, excellent education, and first-rate healthcare systems while preserving the natural beauty of our area. MBEP's strategy is to implement initiatives that are aligned with a vision in housing, broadband access, we know how important that is thanks to the pandemic, and workforce development. At our recent State of the Region conference, which focused on how to drive equitable economic recovery and development in our region, I was so pleased that our own Chris Benner and USC Professor Manuel Pastor delivered a really compelling keynote address at the event. Their work on solidarity economics offers a roadmap for equity-driven economic reform. In a world that's racked by inequality, social divisions, and economic destruction, their approach helps us envision alternative economic models based on mutual compensation, cooperation, reframing what we often refer to as the economy to our economy. And related to that, I also deeply appreciate the work of our Institute for Social Transformation, which Chris leads, and supporting inquiry with impact. This includes growing work with the Salinas Inclusive Economic Development Initiative, and I understand there was a presentation on that yesterday. It's really very exciting work. This work's being funded at UC Santa Cruz by a $650,000 grant from the James Irvine Foundation to conduct community-engaged research and capacity-building work in Salinas. The Institute's partnering with a collection of 9 community organizations in an effort to shift the region's economic landscape to reduce inequality and improve financial stability and the quality of life for local families. This Irvine Foundation grant aims to increase economic advancement opportunities for workers through the creation of new, better-paying jobs for worker protections, benefits, and pathways to advancement. I'm especially pleased that our students are really a key component of this community building, working with the member organizations to develop an interactive story map that will share the goals of the work of each organization and the initiative as a whole. The engagement of UC Santa Cruz students in this work is critical for the success of the project. And it will also have a difference on the whole area, the world, as they enter the world as UC Santa Cruz alumni. And they will have been enriched in their perspectives and their values and their skills by their community-engaged research. And so I think that really is a great note for me to close on, and then maybe we can move to the discussion part.
Oh, it's so good to see everybody. How's the sound? Sounds like a little feedback, or is it okay? Okay, okay. Okay.
Ooh.
Okay, let's just use this. How's this? It's on. It's on. Can you hear me? No. Hold on a sec. I'll turn this off.
On.
No, yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're
Here, right.
sorry about that.
No, it's not your. I dropped it by accident earlier.
It's also muted.
How's that? Yay, we can start. So I do want to begin by thanking both of you. We know how busy you are, and being here is a statement in and of itself. So thank you, not just for your words, but for the gift of your time. So Nancy, I'm going to start with you. You gave us this brilliant introduction to why now's the time. And I was wondering, because you've been involved in this kind of work for so long, for other university leaders who are contemplating taking a leadership role in this area, what are some of the lessons learned that you could be willing to pass on to them about maybe some of the difficulties and challenges of taking on this work? And I'm going to go to my second question either, because we don't have much time, and wrap it together. And the second question is, one of the difficulties is also in the area of critiques of this kind of work by more traditionalist scholars and scholarship. And the critique is that this kind of community-engaged scholarship can diminish research excellence. So I even remember about 10 years ago, an eminent sociologist, Michael Burrows at Berkeley, made a very strong stance for public sociologies, and I was kind of taken aback by the negative reaction by some sociologists. And what is your response to that? And then how do you protect scholars, particularly junior scholars, who want to do this kind of research?
Well, you got right to the heart of the issues, Katharyne. Well, let me start by saying that I think the biggest challenge, and everyone in this audience knows this, so I'm just repeating what you already know. The biggest challenge for this work is really that universities are used to a one-way street. We're used to telling people what they need to know, telling people what the answer is, telling people how to do the work. We tell our students how to do the work. We don't listen to their lived experience. We tell our community members, here's what you need to do. We tell the world what the answer is. And instead, to do this work right, it has to be a two-way street. It actually has to be collaborative and a sense of co-creation. And that's not easy for us, right? We know how to collaborate in a lab setting, right? But even there's a hierarchy. You cannot do this work well with hierarchies. It's got to be a collaborative co-creation. And so one of the things that over my time I've come to really believe in is going to sound so odd, but I believe in physical infrastructure being the antecedent to the kind of social collaborative infrastructure. So for example, at Rutgers Newark, we took 50,000 square feet of an old building that was being renovated in downtown Newark to build a university community arts collaboratory called Express Newark. Because you can't do the voice of Newark without the voice of Newark sitting there and working there. Similarly, the new building that the Honors Living Learning community is sitting in has in it space for an urban solutions lab, space for a collaboration with a big corporation, Fiserv, on what innovative, inclusive technology collaboration could look like. Because you have to bring people into a space that isn't all yours and isn't all theirs, that is actually a space of co-creation. The other thing I would say about the challenge is that universities are pathetically used to one-and-done work. You get a grant. We've all done this, right? Over all our years. You get a grant, you do the research. It might be research in the community, but then it's done. You cannot do good anchor institutions, socially engaged, social justice-oriented work in a one-and-done way. So you have to pay as much attention to the sustained collaborative infrastructure that you're building as you do to the particular study you're doing, or the particular course you're teaching, or the particular answer you're giving to the mayor on that day. It's got to be a sustained collaboration. So for me, that's a big challenge. And then the final challenge, well, two final challenges. One I mentioned in my remarks, and that is this work is always one step forward, 20 steps back. After all, the disparities we're dealing with have been created over hundreds of years. We are not going to solve them in one semester, or even in one 3-year grant from NSF. We have to think about the fact that it's a non-linear path of progress. I mean, look at the non-linear educational path since Brown v. Board. We have more segregated schools by class and race in most of the big cities in this country than we did in the South when Brown v. Board was passed. If that isn't a wake-up call to the fact that there is not a linear path to progress, then I don't know what is. So we have to be prepared for that non-linear path. And then the final thing is, we are not good listeners. I learned this lesson so penetratingly when we were working in Syracuse, and Tim remembers this, when we had this big community and university meeting of what could Syracuse University do for the community. Right? Here's all our expertise. What can we do? And somebody who turned out to be one of my favorite people in the city of Syracuse turned to me publicly in that meeting and said, just listen. We lay our heads down here at night.
Thank you so much. Cindy, as soon as you arrived here at UCSC, you personally reached out to so many community organizations, and I've seen you at a few of them. I've seen you at Second Harvest, for example, in Santa Cruz and beyond. And now you serve on many local boards, including, I learned yesterday, United Way. So why do you think it's important for those at the highest level of university leadership to connect with the community in this way?
Well, first I would say, it's all my great pleasure because in the end it's my community, right? We struggle here in Santa Cruz with this city on the hill perception. And you can see we are here on this beautiful hill and it's lovely. But we are a really important part of the community. We live here. We want to help in every way we can on the ground in the region, reducing the inequities that we face. I was really struck, Katharyne, at the State of the Region address that Chris gave with the comparison of the economic inequality that you see between the coast in our Central Coast region and the inland areas being very reminiscent of what the data looked like during the apartheid period in South Africa. And so for the university, we engage in many ways. I described just a few of those. But it's important for me to be in the community, to be part of the community, and as Nancy so rightly points out, to be also there to listen.
Thank you, and thank you for representing us. It's much appreciated. So Nancy, back to you. Many public institutions, such as Rutgers and UC Santa Cruz, are not endowed with the same level of resources as many private institutions, alas. So for every dollar that you allocate in one direction, one could argue that there's one less dollar that's allocated in another direction. Does community engaged scholarship need, and is it worthy of, precious university financial support for staffing, infrastructure, programming, instruction? If so, how have you directed institutional resources towards supporting and expanding this type of work?
Wow, another $1 million question. Literally $1 million. No. I think there's absolutely no question that we have to take a stand as university leaders of public institutions and say, how do we recapture the public trust? We recapture the public trust by using our resources directly for, not only exclusively, but directly for the kind of work that we're talking about. After all, we are public institutions. So the public trust that needs to be reinstated in this country for public institutions has to come not only because we have to welcome and build critical mass of a new generation at our tables, but because we have to use our resources very openly and clearly to support community-engaged research. We do it by seed grants, by center grants, by positioning junior faculty to be able to do this kind of work, by creating things like the Honors Living Learning Center community, where it's explicitly training students, building on their assets of social justice work to do this work as the next generation. And there's no magic solution of how to get that money. But one of the things that I find is that to the extent that you get senior change agents in all the departments and up and down the university, it really helps. So when you get very distinguished scholars who turn around, and this goes back to your earlier question that I didn't answer because I can't stand it, about why is this work eroding excellence? Well, the only way to get people to see that this is excellence, is to have their change agents, people they perceive as excellent, doing this work and collaborating. So the more interdisciplinary we can be, the more engaged we can be, and the more people we can position. I mean, it's kind of subversive, if you will. We got to position people. My father was a labor union leader years and years and years ago. They positioned people to make change. We have to position people to do this kind of change.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And that's why I have Chris as the director of the Institute, change agents at the helm, and the resources to support them. So, Cindy, this is a question I'm just going to start with you, but it's really, feel free to toss it out to Jasmine and Rebecca and anybody else. And it's sort of connected to this question of how we show research excellence in this area, and it ties into our processes at the university. And for those of you who are not in the university, we have promotion and tenure processes where you go for a certain number of years, and then you have to show your portfolio of work, and there's an adjudication process as to whether you can stay on at the university. And that's called tenure if you get that through that process, and it's a very stressful period of time for junior people, because if you don't, you're pretty much out of the university. So the question is really, this kind of work up till, I'd say, the last few years, I'm talking about community engaged scholarship, has really not been valued as highly in promotion and tenure types of cases, and as more traditional scholarship, publishing in journals or books, et cetera. So at the same time, I would say many of our most recently hired faculty over the past 10 years are very interested in this form of scholarship. And that's largely because we've been hiring more women, more first-generation, low-income, and faculty of color, and these groups tend to be deeply interested in giving back to their communities. So given this confluence, if we want to support and retain our brilliant new faculty, do we need to change our formal policies and procedures? And at the departmental level and at the cultural level, and to properly recognize and reward this kind of scholarship. How do we go about doing that?
Well, thank you, Katharyne. I think this is not a dialogue that happens only at UC Santa Cruz. It's part of a national conversation, and I think it's on the one hand, I was remarking earlier to my colleagues here on the podium how surprisingly conservative universities are, and that we should own that and ask ourselves, why we persist in that way. UC Santa Cruz has a kind of new tagline, leading at the intersection of innovation and social justice. We have to live to that in everything we do. So, one of the barriers, I think, is that it's easier to count than to think, right? We learn to count at a very young age, and that you can count someone's publications. I can count their grant dollars. You can count how many presentations they've given, and in many fields we look at impact factors of the journals, don't they? And also sometimes even the number of citations. All of those are quantitative factors that can be used. They don't always tell you how important a work is, and some work, it's sometimes the most transformational work isn't really understood for what it's going to accomplish for many years. So if you're on the tenure pathway, you don't have 15 or 20 years, right, to let your work really be world-renowned. So I think that what we have to do is to look as a community at how we think about impact, because what we're really looking for is someone's impact through their work. If I'm in the traditional humanities book disciplines, I can count whether or not the person has published a book at every one of those major milestones: tenure, promotion to full, distinguished. I learned at the AAU meeting where I was the last couple days that the number of books being published from universities is dropping precipitously. I'm sure there are a number of reasons why that might be, but I think an important one is that our faculty are engaging in scholarship in other ways, and our Dean of Humanities is really leading this idea that we think about, public humanities, publicly engaged scholarship, community-based research, and we're going to have to figure out how do we evaluate that in a way that recognizes its impact and gives the scholars who are in this kind of unsteady feeling at the juncture some comfort as they work towards tenure. At the University of California, we practice shared governance in a way that's really genuine and true. And so our academic senate colleagues have an important role to play in thinking about the criteria by which the committee that judges scholarship and makes recommendations will be taking into account those new forms of scholarship and their impact.
Thank you for that really great answer. Nancy, do you want to add to that? Or we can also toss it out to, we do have the Dean of Humanities here, and we also have Rebecca London in sociology who's been working on this. All right, let's give it to one of the two of them.
I'm just going to plug my session today at 2:30, where the Dean of Humanities will be speaking, and Elaine Aikita from Lead, California, Bemi from UCLA, who am I forgetting? Tim Eatman from Rutgers, Newark, who was the author of the guidelines put out by Imagining America. 2:30 today, and Humanities 4:50, I think. So join us there.
I do want to make one quick comment on this. People always say numbers don't matter, but numbers really matter in this. And that is one of the ways in which you really get people to pay attention to this work is if there's critical mass of people doing the work. Because critical mass will underplay and undermine all of the stereotype threats, all of the ways in which people don't think of this work as excellence, because they're going to begin to see the variation that is in this work and the richness of it. And so demography is not destiny, numbers are not destiny, but it's pretty darn close.
So encourage your colleagues to follow you into battle and do this kind of work. As Nancy was saying, the more people that we have doing this work, then the better shape we're in. So I want to end by thanking our panelists, our speakers again. Thank you so much. Round of applause, please. And I'll turn it over to Chris. Thank you.
I am sorry that we have to end this conversation because it's been such a dynamic discussion. I really appreciate it. Can we have one more round of applause for all of our great leaders?